right, so welcome to the plant-based Mediterranean meals. My name is Chef Emily, and you are in the virtual teaching kitchen at New York-Presbyterian, Hudson Valley Hospital. Today's program has a focus on heart health for Heart Health Awareness Month, of course, and that's the whole month of February. So a lot of our programs this month are going to be focused on heart health, coming at it from different perspectives. So we have coming up next week, we have some of our esteemed physicians joining us in the kitchen to discuss cholesterol, as well as stress, as well as we had a class yesterday on the latest research about heart health. So this whole month we'll have different heart health programs. So we hope that you can tune in for some of those. And as I mentioned, Christina Conlon, who is our registered dietitian at New York-Presbyterian Hudson Valley Hospital, she is due to join us any moment now. Hopefully she can call in. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm so pleased that you could join us, Christina, and thank you so much for devoting your time to our community and to this class. So before we get started, Christina, if you'd like to introduce yourself and share a little bit about why plant-based meals and what's the Mediterranean diet, if you want to give us a little introduction on that before we begin.
So I'm Christina, like Emily said, I'm the nutrition manager at Hudson Valley Hospital. So the Mediterranean diet also has been called as the anti-inflammatory diet. It is a mostly plant-based diet that includes seafood, minimal amounts of dairy and poultry, and next to no red meat. It's not something that's not allowed on the diet, but it's something that is a minimal amount of food that you want to have, because the idea is to eat foods that have anti-inflammatory, antioxidant properties. Red meats, dairy, and other meats tend to have pro-inflammatory properties, which can cause inflammation. So that's why we keep them in the lower amounts that you would eat in this type of diet. It's not the same as a vegetarian diet. Vegetarian diets would exclude any kind of chicken, pork, beef, bacon. It does, depending on the vegetarian, include things like eggs and dairy. Some of them will allow fish in their diet, whereas a vegan diet is just fruits, vegetables, plants, no baked goods that includes things baked with eggs or baked with milk or anything derived from animals. So they link in, but they're, slight differences.
Thank you so much for that clarification, Christina. And I think it's so important to remember that at least one of the things that I love about this kind of eating pattern and lifestyle is that it's so much more flexible and achievable than some of the other diets that are out there. So it makes it easy to, integrate into your lifestyle for a more long-term, in more of a long-term way. So it's achievable, it's accessible. You can include lots of different things and lots of variety of different food groups. And so that's one of the reasons we love it here at the Teaching Kitchen. So thank you for that. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We all have our little packet with recipes, which I'll also send out at the end of our program today, along with a feedback survey. And we're going to get started with our first recipe, which is the roasted cauliflower, carrot, and chickpea stew. This is really, really flavorful, really tasty. And you're kind of cooking in two steps. So the first step is to roast the cauliflower and the carrots with this wonderful spice mixture. So we made our little spice mix today using turmeric. This is a great way to clean out your spice cabinet, right? Make this dish. Turmeric, coriander, we've got some cumin, as well as, I used a little bit of cardamom, but I put that as optional in the recipe because cardamom can be pricey. So if you don't have it, don't worry, it's not essential. And then paprika as well. And I ground those up all together with a little bit of cinnamon to make our own little spice mixture. So this is all written in your packets. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with this recipe first. Then we're gonna make our fennel and orange salad and arugula. It's really, really flavorful. And we're gonna finish that off with a tasty little treat for you all today. So the first thing that I did is I actually went ahead This is the step that takes a little bit of time. And I roasted the cauliflower and the carrots with a little bit of olive oil on a sheet pan using parchment paper, so it's a little bit easier to clean. And just roasted that for about 20 minutes or so till it got nice and golden. And look how beautiful the colors are, right? So we're going to be using this. But the first, or rather the second step is to get our pot ready. And we're going to chop up an onion and add that into the pot. So what else is going into this? We're going to be using onion, garlic, our spice mixture, as well as some chickpeas and a can of diced tomatoes. So we're using 2 cans of chickpeas, which are a great source of protein. Christina, what do we love about chickpeas? Is there anything in particular that you find appealing about them?
I mean, chickpeas, like you said, they're a great source of protein. They have lots of fiber in them, which is healthy for, digestion, building up the digestive tract. It's also very versatile. There's something that are great low-calorie, low-fat kind of snack. If you were to roast them, add some, anti-inflammatory seasonings like the ones you're using in the turmeric, cinnamon. They're a nice little snack alternative. And they're very filling, so you can eat those and they'll kind of not encourage you, but you might feel full longer. You'll eat a little less than you normally would if you were eating something a little more higher in fat.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much. So they're filling, they're full of fiber, protein, and they're a great snack. I'm using the canned chickpeas today, which I then rinse. So I put them in this little sieve or a little colander, whatever you've got, run them under some cold water. And we're just gonna start by cooking our onion in a little bit of extra virgin olive oil, one of the key tenets of the Mediterranean diet. Now, oil should be stored in a cool, dark place. I always put some out here for the week, but otherwise it's in a tin in a cool, dark place, because there's 2 things that can make oil go rancid faster. One of them is light and the other is heat. You expose it to, so if you put it by your windowsill where it's nice and sunny, right, eventually over time that oil is going to be depleted. We also have Alita, who is our moderator today, Christina, and Alita is a volunteer here at New York-Presbyterian Hudson Valley Hospital. Alita, I just want to check in with you and see, do we have any questions so far about this recipe?
So there's one question that just came up. It said, for those of us, and hello everybody, for those of us with kidney disease and diabetes, as well as heart disease, what are some of the things that they could add to or not include in the Mediterranean style diet?
So the Mediterranean diet is actually ideal for both of these conditions because of all of the fiber in the foods. It's low glycemic, so the digestion of it is a little slowed. The blood sugars won't go up as high because of all the fiber content in it. There's no foods in this diet that should be eliminated for someone with diabetes. And the whole basis of the diet, besides the fiber, is the heart healthy fats from the nuts and seeds, olive oils, which they are fats, but they're fats that help with heart health. They help reduce cholesterol. It focuses on herbs and seasonings rather than salt to enhance the flavor of foods. So it's an extremely heart healthy and can be a diabetic diet as long as you're eating your carbohydrates in moderation.
Great, thank you. That's a great answer, Christina. So I'm just chopping up some garlic here. This is our little garlic clove, and you can just grab one of your spice jars and give it a smash to pop the skins off. And then we're just gonna gently mince this apart. You can cut off, sometimes at the bottom, there's like a little tough piece where it was connected to the root. If you wanna kind of cut those off and get rid of those, that's always good, so you don't end up with little pieces of that, in your food. All right, so I'm just mincing that up. We've got our onions sauteing here, and I just cut it into a simple, slice across, nice and thin. So it was a really simple cut. I'll show you guys what it looks like in here. right? So nice, simple slice. And you can see they're starting to soften. They're starting to get a little bit translucent. So this is a good time to add our garlic, which cooks a little bit faster than the onion, right? So we'll add that garlic in. And let's throw in our canned tomatoes. Christina, is there anything you'd like to share about tomatoes? I know I have a few things if you don't.
Yeah, tomatoes are full of antioxidants. Tomatoes are actually something that the antioxidant property of tomatoes is enhanced when you cook them. As other fruits and vegetables, it's ideal to eat raw to be able to not lose the nutrients, but the lycopene in tomatoes actually gets more activated when you cook it.
Thank you. That's so interesting, Christina. I'm just noticing that someone may have their microphone unmuted. I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. So if you've just joined us, please check your microphone and make sure. It sounds like it's taken care of now. So thank you.
They took care of it.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I know it's tricky sometimes when you're signing in. So we've got the chickpeas in there. I put in that heap of spices, lots of different spices. As Christina mentioned, spices is really where we're going to be flavoring our food from. And we're going to add in the diced canned tomatoes. And that's so interesting to know that the tomatoes actually, their antioxidant qualities are actually heightened if you cook them. That's really cool. All right, so we're gonna add that right in, and then let's put in our cauliflower and carrots. And remember, these have been roasted ahead of time just to save us a little bit of time today. So one of the spices that we're using today is turmeric. And it's really gained a lot of attention recently. Most of you who have taken my classes before know that I love to use turmeric. Christina, what's your perspective on turmeric?
Turmeric is another, again, one of the focuses, has anti-inflammatory, antioxidant properties. It has, similar to, if you know, something like calcium needs to go with vitamin D to help with absorption. Iron needs vitamin C to help with absorption. Something like turmeric, you want something like black pepper to go with it to help with the absorption and utilizing those nutrients to get that anti-inflammatory properties for it.
Okay, so you need the turmeric to be paired with fresh black pepper. Is that what you're saying?
Ideally. Okay.
Well, that's easy enough, right? We could just crack some black pepper right in here just in case. So yeah, as Christina mentioned, the antioxidant quality of turmeric is really, really powerful, and anti-inflammatory qualities are really powerful as well. Excellent. All right, everybody.
Here. Can I answer real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. And read it so that everybody else can hear it, just in case they're not on chat.
There was a question about the diet, since it is about nuts, seeds, beans, and things like that for someone with diverticulosis. Yeah. So avoiding these things is kind of an outdated notion for someone with diverticulosis. They are safe to have. You need to just chew it very well. So there would be no need to avoid any of them. If it's a concern for you, then you could substitute it as almond butters, peanut butters, sesame seeds, you know, like a tahini kind of
brown
thing.
Down.
Right, but they don't need to be avoided with diverticulosis. The high fiber foods actually is extremely beneficial.
That's excellent to hear, Christina, because I know that for a long time, the advice was if you have diverticulosis that you shouldn't eat nuts and seeds. Now it's changed, right, within the past year or so. So it's a good reminder to all of us to keep checking in, right? The field of nutrition is dynamic. It's changing. As soon as, I'm sure that, you know, Christina, some of the things that, you know, you learned in school are changed today, and the science is constantly being updated. So it's a really interesting field for that reason. But it also means that as consumers, we have to constantly be vigilant and looking at the science and understanding if it still applies today. All right. Alita, any questions? I'll just check in with you quickly.
Yes, so there's a question about olive oil. It should not be used in cooking when it is heated. That's a question.
Yeah, so Christina, do you want to field that question or shall I?
I mean, it's my understanding that olive oil shouldn't be brought up to extreme heats. That's when you have those concerns for those carcinogens kind of being exposed. But it was my understanding that at lower heats, it's fine and safe to use.
Yeah, so I'm with you on that, Christina. So the understanding about olive oil is that it shouldn't be heated to high temperatures. And I think that the number is 375, but we're not putting a thermometer in our pot. Basically, you don't want to overheat olive oil because the molecular structure of the oil will start to break down and turn it from being a healthy fat into one that's not so good for us. So that's the current thinking about olive oil, is you don't want to heat it up too high. There's also some nuances in that as well. Extra virgin olive oil is different from a regular olive oil that's been more refined. So the regular olive oils can go slightly higher than the extra virgin olive oil. So if you are going to bake or roast, then you can use olive oil, but not the extra virgin kind. It gets very, very confusing. So I hope that made sense to everybody.
And Chef, question about the 28 ounce of tomatoes that is listed in the recipe. Could they use something smaller?
Yeah, so ideally you want to use a nice big can of 28 ounces of tomatoes. I only had one 15-ounce can today, so that's what we're using. I think I wrote 28 ounces in the recipe. Yeah, it is, right? So I only got one can today, so that's what I'm using, but definitely the ideal would be to use the full 28 ounces. But it's a pretty simple recipe. You can play around with quantities. If you don't like tomatoes so much, you can use less. But certainly the ideal would be to use what's listed in the recipe. So I just threw in our parsley, and we're going to get started. Thank you, Alita. We're going to get started with our next recipe, which is the fennel salad. So if you're not familiar with fennel, this is what it looks like. We're going to cut off the top parts here because they are not really palatable. Everything that I work with here, by the way, has been washed ahead of time. So just keep that in mind for your own kitchens. You want to wash stuff before using it. All right, so with our fennel, I'm just going to cut it right in half, and I'll show you sort of, there's a big glare today because it's super sunny, which is nice. I'm not going to complain about that, but I hope you can all see okay. So I cut it in half first, then I'm going to cut it into quarters, and then just very, very thin slices, as thin as you can get them, right? Fennel has a very strong sort of licorice flavor. So if you don't like that, you may not enjoy fennel, but that flavor does become a bit more mellow if you roast it or if you bake it. So you can cook it, and the flavor, that licorice flavor, will kind of diminish a little bit. Christina, do you have any thoughts about fennel? I feel like it's a very underappreciated food.
I completely agree. I absolutely love fennel. I think it gives a great savory kind of flavor. It's a great way to use, instead of adding like a sugary kind of thing, it gives like a natural kind of sweetness. So you have all that flavor, high in fiber, antioxidants, goes along with everything that we keep talking about.
Yes, excellent. Thank you. So we threw that fennel right on top of our arugula. Arugula, of course, again, is high in fiber, phytochemicals. It contains some calcium, a little potassium, some vitamins, and it has this really nice, distinctive peppery taste. It has a little bit of a peppery taste and crunch. You can enjoy arugula raw, or you can cook it. You can, throw it in a pan and give it a quick saute if you want to kind of diminish that strong peppery flavor. Or eat it raw, whichever you prefer. So I'm going to work to take apart this orange I have today. This is going to add some sweetness to this salad. And I'm cutting off the top and the bottom, and then I'm going to cut around to take the skin off, right? Kind of curving my knife around the bottom. And I'll check in with you, Alita, on questions.
So yeah, there was a question regarding the previous recipe. Chef Emily, someone noticed that you unwrapped your washed herbs. How long will they last in the fridge using this method?
Awesome. So I love how perceptive this community is. Everybody notices everything. It's amazing. So, so certainly when I store my herbs, here, I'll bring this back so you can all see it. I've got this paper towel. This is just a regular, kind of damp paper towel. I wash the herbs really well when I bring them home from the grocery store. Wash them well, put them in the paper towel, and then I roll them up, right? So the paper towel is around the leaves and the stems are sticking out. The leaves are what need to stay slightly damp. So every few days, I'll just run this under a little water to keep it damp, and it'll keep for 5 to 7 days easily in the refrigerator. It stays nice and fresh. Yeah. Sometimes even longer. It always depends, right? Because if you got your parsley from the grocery store on a Monday and they got their parsley on a Friday, it's already been sitting out for 3 days, right? So it's always hard to know, exactly what how long the grocery store has had it sitting there. Any other questions?
Yes, it says, since fennel tastes like licorice, does it have the same nutritional health properties?
That's a really good question. Christina, do you have any thoughts about that? I'm not too familiar with the health properties of licorice, so I'd be interested.
The health properties are more of a old school medicinal type of thing. It's a little soothing, maybe might have some things to help like during illnesses. It's not something that's scientifically backed up by evidence to support that it has any real nutritional value, especially if you're eating it in the forms of candies, cough drops, where now you're taking in more sugar than you would be getting benefits from licorice. But one being a kind of like something that you add in and one being a fresh vegetable, I wouldn't say they're really the same.
Thank you so much. So I am just supreming this orange, meaning that I'm cutting the pith out of it to get these beautiful, nice jewels of orange slices, and we're going to sprinkle that into our salad. Now, of course, there's lots of great fiber in here too. So if you don't want to do this sort of supreme technique, forget it, and you can just chop it up and add that right into the salad with all of the pith and everything, right? I'm sure, Christina, you probably prefer that method, right?
Yeah, I mean, you like it however you like it.
Yeah. All right, so we've got our fennel, we have our arugula, we have our orange pieces. We're gonna add a little bit of salt here, chop up some olives. These are Kalamata olives, and they have been pitted. Now, because the olives are naturally quite salty, oh, there's still a pit hanging out in there. You just want to keep that in mind as you're seasoning your salad, that the olives are going to add a lot of salt already. So you may not need to add more salt to it, right? So we're getting our salt flavors directly from the olives instead of adding it in. You can also add cheese to this salad if you want to have sort of like a Parmesan or some kind of a leaner, cheese. That would work too. All right, so we've got our olives. Look how colorful and beautiful that is. And we're going to top this with some toasted walnuts. Now you can just kind of crunch these up over the whole top. And walnuts, of course, add lots of vitamin E, as well as have some antioxidants, all that good stuff we've been talking about. So the citrus, especially the orange, high in vitamin C, and vitamin C is thought to support the production of white blood cells, which are really key to fighting infections and supporting your immune system. So you definitely want to try to include some vitamin C in your diet, especially this time of year, right? Okay, so let me just give my hands a little rinse here now that I've got walnuts all over them. And we're gonna go ahead and make our salad dressing, which is nice and easy. Everything's just gonna get mixed together in this little, I have a little Tupperware here. We're gonna use white balsamic vinegar. The reason I'm using the white balsamic today is mostly for color, and the flavor is a little bit lighter. So I didn't want the beautiful, the beautiful colors of the fennel and the orange to kind of get muddled by the brown balsamic vinegar. So I'm using a white balsamic today and our extra virgin olive oil. And I'm just gonna shake this up. This is a very, very simple, possibly the most simple vinaigrette, right? So just olive oil and vinegar, nothing else. You could also use lemon juice if you wanted to do that. Or, red wine vinegar or sherry vinegar or something would be fine. And by shaking it, I'm emulsifying it. So I'm adding air, and that's gonna help to unify the vinegar, pour this over the salad, the vinegar and the olive oil, right? Any questions about that before we turn to our final recipe?
Yes, there are two. Chef Emily, what are the substitutes for the arugula? Someone doesn't like arugula. And then the second question, could you add ginger?
Ooh, okay, fun questions. So if you don't like arugula, this is a salad. Use any kind of green that you enjoy as a salad. You can use mixed lettuces. Spinach would be fine as well. So I like the arugula because it's nice and peppery, but I do understand that can be an abrasive taste. So if that's not for you, then certainly feel free to use, whatever kind of salad green you like. And then the other question, I'm sorry, could you repeat the other question, Alita?
It was about the ginger, adding ginger.
Oh, okay, so adding ginger. Certainly if you wanted to add some, freshly grated ginger, I think that would be a really nice flavor combination. I wouldn't add candied ginger just because that can contain a lot of sugar. So that's the only note I want to say on that.
And Chef Emily, there was a question regarding the chickpea stew. Are you able to freeze this, in portions in the fridge?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this one, this would freeze actually pretty well. It's mostly just vegetables. There's no dairy in it. There's nothing in here I think that wouldn't freeze well. The chickpeas may change their texture a little bit. Sometimes when you freeze beans and then you defrost them, they can get a little mushy. But otherwise, I think it might be okay. Yeah. All right, so let's move to our third recipe, which is the special dessert we have for you, the Greek yogurt parfait. We're gonna start by combining our frozen mixed berries. And these are partially thawed at this point because I took them out a little bit earlier before the class. So we're gonna start by mixing those with some honey. And it calls for a 1/4 cup. You could use a little, you could use less if you don't like things as sweet. So we're just gonna let this kind of cook down a little bit. And while we're doing that, Christina, what makes this dessert sort of a healthier treat or alternative to, a regular dessert that we might have, like a cake or cookie or something like that?
So things like cake and cookie would be like a empty calories kind of treat. They're good to have every once in a while because they taste fantastic. But something like this, which also would taste great, gives you some actual nutritional benefits. The yogurt has probiotics, the honey adds in the prebiotics, which is great for your gut bacteria. They're low glycemic, so for someone who's a diabetic, if blood sugars are a concern, this would be a great thing to have because then your fruit and your nuts also give you that fiber that helps slow down digestion, helps you keep a little, feel a little fuller. And it's a great source of protein for someone who's trying to go more plant-based rather than meat.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So we're starting off by adding our berries with the honey. We'll let that cook down a little bit. And then we're going to add a mix of cornstarch and water to this. So that's what I have in this little bowl. It's called a slurry. So you always want to mix your cornstarch with a little bit of water before adding it to the pot. Otherwise, it's going to clump, right? So we're going to let this cook down just until the berries kind of start to burst. And in the meantime, we're going to mix together our Greek yogurt. This is a non-fat Greek yogurt. Now, this is a plant-based class, so I also want to discuss the option to use a plant-based yogurt. If you want, certainly you can use, your your dairy-free yogurts. Christina, do you have any thoughts about dairy-free yogurts, like almond and soy and coconut and things like that?
My only concern with things like those are they're fine for you. You just want to keep an eye on the labels, because often for those things to make them taste more appealing is to add a lot of sugar and other kind of thickening agents and stuff that isn't necessarily something you might want to eat. So just read your labels when you're choosing things like that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great reminder. A lot of the non-dairy yogurts are often flavored and have lots of sugars added to them. So certainly feel free to make that substitution though, if you want, if you have a good one that you like. And we're gonna mix this with a little bit of whipped cream. So this is a light whipped cream that is, I guess what makes it light? It says, oh, I guess it's made with skim milk. So there you go. That's how it's like. So we're going to shake this up and we're going to sort of do half and half, right? So adding whipped cream into the yogurt instead of having it be, you know, just one or the other. So this is going to help to just make it a little more of an extra special treat. And you can do this in a standing mixer or with a handheld mixer, or you can do it by hand, right? The way we're doing it here. And you just really want to whip these together well. So we've got our berries that are starting to thicken and sizzle and pop a little bit. You can use a fork or a potato masher to kind of squish them down and encourage those juices to come out, right? So these are pretty much melted at this point. So I have a mix of blackberries, strawberries, and Christina, is there anything in particular about berries? You know, we always hear that they're really good for us, and they're sort of the best fruit for us to enjoy. Why is that from a nutritional standpoint?
Well, berries are very low in sugar compared to other fruits. So you can have a little bit more of them and not have as much. Even though they're natural sugars, it still turns into the same kind of sugars when you're digesting it. And they have a lot more of those antioxidants in there because they're stronger in color, and the darker the colors, the more of those antioxidants and, you know, phytonutrients that you'll find in them.
Interesting. So the color is indicative of an expression of phytonutrient density. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Correct. So there's different antioxidants, different vitamins, phytonutrients that cause the different colors in the fruits and vegetables. That's why you want to eat what they say is a rainbow, a big variety to get a little bit of all of them.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Lita, I'll check in with you here. How's our audience doing?
So yes, we have two questions. One is carrageenan good or bad?
Ooh.
And then, is the cornstarch water mixture needed?
Okay, so I'll address the cornstarch one first. So you do not need to add it, but if you want to create more of a jammy kind of silken, you know, texture, then you're going to want to use this cornstarch mixture, but it's not essential. So let me show you what we're looking at in here. We've just got the berries and the honey together, right? And you'll see sort of how the texture will change when we add this cornstarch mixture. It's going to get thick and glossy and almost more like jam-like. So that's one of the reasons that we're using it today, to kind of create our own kind of jam consistency. And as for the carrageenan, I don't even know if I'm saying that correctly. Christina, do you have any thoughts on that? I know it's pretty controversial.
Yeah, so that's something where it depends on what you Google and who you ask. Some people, it is very naturally derived, so it would be better than some, you know, like engineered kind of things. But then, you know, some studies will tell you that it's very harmful and causes cancer, but there is no actual experimental evidence to kind of support it either way. So for my personal, is always anything in, you know, small doses, not going to hurt you.
Right. Thank you for that. Yeah, I've certainly heard it both ways. I've heard that if you have a really sensitive digestive system, that it might, it might be difficult to digest, but it is naturally derived thickener from seaweed. So again, it hopefully would be okay, but it's one of those things that's probably, a very personal choice. So you can see now we've basically made this beautiful, thick, right, naturally sweetened jam. You can see like this nice consistency. That's because of the cornstarch. So I'm going to let that cool down a little bit. We'll add it to our yogurt. There's a couple other things going into this yogurt. You can add a bit more honey for sweetness. Keep in mind you've already added the whipped cream, which may be sweet, so you might not even need that extra honey. That's up to you. You can taste it and see. Let's add some vanilla bean paste. And this is the kind that I'm using today, but you could use vanilla extract. I don't know if you guys can see that. There you go. And I'm going to add a little touch of cinnamon, both for flavor and Christina, do you have thoughts about cinnamon? I've heard that it may help to kind of manage blood sugar. What are your thoughts on that?
That's something
Probably
that,
need to eat
again,
a lot of cinnamon, right?
Yeah, there's no scientific research done to support it, but there is some correlations, and it is said that it has blood sugar, helps with blood sugar control. It could be something as simple as you use cinnamon and then you don't use sugar, and therefore by default you're eating less sugar and your blood sugars are better.
That's a really good point. Thank you. Alita, any questions before we plate our...
Chef Emily, there was one question regarding the washing scallions and wrapping it in the wet paper a bit longer. Is that recommended?
So the herb that I used today, just to clarify, was parsley. But yes, absolutely, you can do the same. You can do the same kind of herbal preservation technique that we use today for scallions, for cilantro, for parsley. I don't do it with things like oregano and rosemary and thyme. I don't do it with those because they don't require the same amount of sort of hydration as the other ones. But yes, it would be fine for scallions, parsley, and cilantro. Basil is a little bit of a tricky one. I almost forgot to mention it. Basil basil will tend to get brown if it goes into the fridge. So just keep that in mind when you buy basil. You do want to try to use it as soon as possible.
And then there's a question that just came in. This is regarding dish number 1. The person wants to know about tomatoes being anti-inflammatory, and she thought that as a nightshade, since they're inflammatory and they should be avoided by arthritics.
Great question. Christina, do you have thoughts on that?
Tomatoes, the health property in tomatoes is lycopene, which is an antioxidant. Antioxidants aid in being anti-inflammatory. It could be something that there's just not significant enough amounts, perhaps, that includes them in those nightshade veggies. But again, that's something that these are helpful suggestions on avoiding for people. They're not necessarily, if you stay away from these things, it will improve your arthritis.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. And it's going to be, very person specific as well. You may just have to test and see for yourself, what works for you. So we are, human beings with individual kind of compositions, and diets and recommendations aren't always one size fits all. So when it comes to nightshades, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, in relationship to arthritis, some people do fine with it, other people don't. So you have to sort of test and see for yourself and check in with your doctor about, what's the best choice for you. So I just cut a couple wedges of lime. It's nice to serve this if you want with a little squeeze of lime over it. Add more vitamin C into your diet. All right, so here's our first our fennel salad, our second dish, I should say. And then here is our cauliflower and chickpea stew. Lots and lots of different veggies in here, loads of fiber, protein, lots of spices for flavor, right? And as we wrap up, and the few, I know I'm keeping you a little bit over, the few moments that we have left, Christina, do you have anything else you'd like to share for our class today?
Yeah, there's one thing that I just want to emphasize that we didn't really get to touch upon with this diet. One of the concerns tends to be getting enough protein in your diet, and people like to load themselves with soy and other kind of meat substitutes. Not necessary. People don't actually need as much protein as we tend to think nowadays. But it's really important with this diet that if you're going plant-based, you need to have a whole grain and a vegetable, because they both contain different amino acids, and when you combine them, you get that complete protein that your body can use, you know, to build itself. So it's important to have that combination of the both of them.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that and clarifying that. And in this recipe, in fact, you may notice at the bottom, it says for the roasted cauliflower, carrot, and chickpea stew, enjoy with couscous, quinoa, whole wheat pita, or brown rice. And that was intentional exactly for that reason, Christina. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, because it is important to kind of complement these plant-based protein sources with a grain or something that that completes the protein. So thank you. I just assembled our little yogurt, our little parfait treat here, threw some walnuts on top, and these are our recipes today. So our time is up, so thank you so much everybody for joining. Christina, so appreciative of your amazing wisdom. Your nutritional tidbits are always fascinating and extremely beneficial to our community, so thank you so much for taking the time to tune in today. Thank you, Alita, for being our wonderful moderator. And if we didn't get to your question, you can surely feel free to email me. My email address, I think you all have it already, but Alita, if you'd like to put my email address in the chat box, people can feel free to email myself, and hopefully I can get to it this afternoon. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed this plant-based Mediterranean meals class. Come on back for more programs. We hope to see you again soon.